everybody, and welcome. My name is José Gaona, founder and CEO of Zeta. So excited for today's conversation. We're really going to get into it today, and I'm going to try my best not to embarrass myself in this conversation. Today's webinar is on esports and the future of gaming culture. The reason I say I'm going to try my best not to embarrass myself is because even though I definitely did play video games as a kid, shout out to the PlayStation 2, I am not as in this area of like kind of activity as much as other people are. So this has been a fun conversation to prepare for, but I am accompanied by the best. And so going to get into it and hopefully have a great conversation today. Thank you all for joining. So as we know, Gen Z has countless ways of staying entertained and engaged with the digital world today. Very few of those outlets are as popular as gaming. Now, some of y'all might be thinking, what is gaming, right? Depending on how old you are, that might go as back as like arcades, as back as like, the PlayStation, first Xbox. And for our younger folks in the generation, I think it's a lot more digital, right? Today, 4 in 10 Gen Z teens identify as gamers, which is a huge percentage of our demographic. And what did start as kind of an at-home or in the arcade experience is now growing into a digital community of people all over the world that are not just playing, but are developing culture, careers out of this work, and community. We've seen over the past decade esports tournaments starting to fill arenas, streamers building massive global audiences and even fortunes, adding to this growing culture for our generation. This isn't just a hobby anymore. It's not just an activity that we do to avoid our work. This is a real industry adding value to our economy to the tune of billions of dollars. And it's powered by creativity and influencing a whole generation. Today, we're going to explore how Gen Z is redefining the future of gaming through entrepreneurship, content creation, innovation, and what it means to grow up in a world where gaming can be both your downtime and also your job. Joining us today for that amazing conversation is someone that knows a lot more than I do, which is great, and is not only a marketing expert, but a lifelong gamer himself who knows how exciting this industry is. We're welcoming Zach Oscar. For the last several years, Zach has been educating brands and marketers on how to reach gamers and working agency side with clients such as AT&T, Samsung, Meta, Erman Miller, Activization Blizzard, and more. As a senior account director at Viral Nation, Zach leads the agency's account team dedicated to Meta's virtual reality and mixed reality headset, super cool, Meta Quest, among other projects with Meta. Zach is opening the doors for business to understand the potential of gaming and to tap into younger markets. Zach, I am so glad that you're here for this conversation. I've checked out some of these tools through Meta, the Meta Quest, but I am just, I'm trying my best to get back into the space here. I don't know, I'm not quite a gamer right now.
Everyone's a gamer now, so you know, don't sell yourself short. Everything that you've played in your life, it counts, right? We're very inclusive in the gaming space, or we try to be. So there's no shame in jumping back in at any time. That's what gaming is all about. I hope to be gaming in like full body immersive technology when I'm 80.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
We'll
and you're talking about something that's like, it is on the kind of on the edge of reality, right? I mean, I don't know if it's quite like accessible right now to everybody, but I've seen some of those setups. Folks now go to like a lot of those immersive experiences to do just that, which is, I think, kind of like the stuff of our dreams just like 15 years ago, which is awesome. I'm super excited to have you. And we're going to talk about a lot today. Because you have both as a participant and as a leader in the space, you've done quite a lot. And I think it's a really exciting thing to share with people. as a tech policy organization and as an organization that tries to elevate young perspectives in tech, this is one of those areas where we actually see our consumerism, like our participation in gaming, as a generation, driving forward technology, even beyond gaming. And so this has been a conversation we've been wanting to have for a while. So
great. No, I'm super happy to be here and happy to talk about it. I think it's fantastic, the level of interest that brands and marketers are developing in gaming. I think that the gaming community at its best can be such a unifier and such a great place for people to be themselves and have fun playing video games, as simple as that. And unfortunately, you see a lot of highlights around gaming that have to do with, communities that can be really outspoken negatively about certain topics and whatnot. But I think that it's a community that's given so much to me. And so I was so fortunate to not only make my career out of it, but also lifelong friendships and keep in contact with people. So lots to talk about, lots to unpack. Even just in the title of the webinar, there's stuff I want to get into. But yeah, I'll let you kick us off.
Yeah. So I want to kind of like be mindful of anyone that just maybe doesn't understand what's happened with gaming over the last couple of decades, or even just the last decade. So, yeah, I think today everyone knows gaming is kind of, integrated into things that we have at home, right? But when did we kind of see that shift in your opinion, from kind of isolated gaming or individual gaming, arcade-based gaming, to now this like digital community and revolution in gaming?
Yeah. I am definitely not a gaming historian, but I can definitely hit you with some of the facts that I know to be true. So I think the first gaming console ever made was in the 1970s. I want to say it was the Odyssey, something Odyssey console, which was the first time that people could bring home a gaming device, right? Because otherwise it was arcades, it was, venues, etc. And so while there were definitely local, arcade legends, it reminds me, what's that movie? Brief tangent. There's a weird movie about a young guy who falls in love with this older woman, and it came out, Licorice Pizza, was that what it was called? Maybe you've heard of it.
No idea.
So basically there's an arcade is like a central part of that, but basically you had arcade gamers and lots of people who would get together to go to the arcade, but there was local communities, but not necessarily digital and broad. And in the 1990s, I believe, is when Nintendo, Atari, Sega Genesis, some of those consoles started to become more massively popular. You'd see them in a lot of homes, but it wasn't until the early 2000s when I believe Xbox Live entered the scene, and there was a lot more massive multiplayer online games like World of Warcraft, which I'll talk about more as we go along, but where you could basically see meet people exclusively online and through a gaming medium, right? So of course, AIM and stuff was already existing. I don't know exactly the timeline on those. It's not like you couldn't meet people online, and I'm sure online dating was already starting at that time. But to meet people through gaming while gaming was new in the 2000s, and that's really when you saw this online community take off. But with the exception of Call of Duty, which I think was like the first, non-nerdy, it didn't have the stigma of being a nerdy single player kind of story game. It was a multiplayer game. And I like to joke that, as many people do, I'm not original for this joke, but people today couldn't have grown up in the Xbox Live lobbies that we grew up in, because the people were just saying whatever back then, right? There was no sense of political correctness, I would say, at the time. So it was a weird place. But the stigma started to be a little less, oh, like it's nerds in their mom's basements, but it was still pretty prevalent until I want to say 2000 and maybe 14 or 15, whenever it was that Fortnite came out. Fortnite as the first, and I know I'm throwing around a lot of terms that I'm going to have to unpack here, but Fortnite was the first battle royale, which basically meant, if you're familiar with Hunger Games, basically a number of people are dropped into an arena. They have to fight to the death. The winner is the winner, right? And Fortnite was the first massively popular game to do that. And it gripped so many different people from so many different walks of life that it stopped being as stigmatized, gaming in general, through the release of titles like Fortnite. So that's when you really saw celebrities like Travis Scott and DJ Marshmello and other popular figures and football players and whatever getting into gaming and being publicly outspoken about the fact that they were gamers. And that definitely took us from gaming is this niche thing that people do and avoid the sunlight, to this is something that really drives community and a lot of people just like to do, right? And I will say that I do draw a little bit of a line, and as I think is important for people trying to understand the space, between what I would call casual gaming and more hardcore gaming, right? People who play Candy Crush on their phone are gamers, right? Like, it's a video game, you're playing it. But marketing to someone who plays Candy Crush and marketing to someone who puts, 20 hours a week into Call of Duty are two very different things. So it's important to delineate that. But I will say that, and I know I'm jumping in a lot of different directions, that mobile gaming is half of the global income around video games. So on its own, mobile gaming makes up roughly 50%. And then you have console and PC, which are the other roughly 2/4 each. So it's a very large space. It's very difficult to understand all the nuances, but we'll unpack some more of those today. So to answer your question, in sum, 1990s, more at-home consoles, early 2000s, online communities start to form. And then I think the 2010s and the last decade, that's when you started to see gaming become a much more agnostic identity than it had previously been.
You have given me a lot to unpack there. And
Yeah.
and I think what stands out to me, there's two things that kind of stand out immediately. And those are, number one, as someone that has become very aware through our work about kind of these milestones in capacity, technologically speaking, right? As the internet progressed from 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, it's very interesting to really understand that there's direct capacity increase then there for our gaming possibilities. Yeah. When we have faster, stronger internet, our ability to engage in more dynamic, complex gaming increases, right?
Yeah.
And so
and just to interrupt you briefly, before there was the internet and the capability of networking with people online gaming wise, you had people doing LAN parties. And I'm not sure if folks know what LAN stands for, local area network. So basically you could just get together with your friends in their basement and bring your console or your PC or whatever, and then you would all connect to a local network that wasn't necessarily about being on the internet, but rather about playing together across the same session. So people were bootstrapping, multiplayer gaming at first in their homes. And then it became online through internet capability, as you've said. And I know lots of people, myself included, who when I'm moving or thinking about new places to live, or upgrading or whatever, I'm checking out what internet's available.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
first and
Yeah.
foremost, because I can't, for most people, any internet connection is fine for the basic stuff you want to do, watching TV and movies, streaming, that kind of thing. But for gaming, you need really strong internet in order to avoid latency issues and other issues. So it's really become a vital part of being a gamer, means that you're like very concerned about your hardware, your internet, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Which is like it's really fascinating. Like, and I'm thinking about like the things that I know about like fiber technology, like data, like our older copper infrastructure, like speeds where we're talking like speed differences of less than like a second, but they make a difference when you're dealing with something that is so immediate and so complex as gaming.
Oh, definitely. I mean, just for fun, I'll say there's a measurement in gaming, especially in competitive gaming, called APM, actions per minute. Right. And you have some of the top players in the space. If you watch them play some of these titles, they're moving crazy fast. Their fingers are clicking things every half a second. I mean, it's insane. So when you have such high touch gaming involved, you need good connection. You need to make sure that you're not having those issues. So yes, all the technology is definitely evolved.
It is so interesting. And we go from having conversations about like there's still people who don't have access to like decent internet, to then also talking about like what is the value and what is the real application of like us increasing our speeds, right? 6G is not that far away. Like we're already talking about what that deployment is going to look like.
To be honest,
I
don't know what the 6th G is going to do for us, but I'm happy for it to come.
I think we're talking more immersive experiences, more like VR, AR integration into our daily lives, more bandwidth for like autonomous vehicles. I've started to better understand what that means, and it really revolutionizes our day to day every time we add more capacity there. And so it is, but gaming is one of those places. The second thing I was going to bring up, which I think it makes me have it brings a question up, is you're talking about like half the revenue coming from mobile.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about my mom, who like is like a killer Candy Crush player.
Most moms are.
Yeah, exactly. She's like a diehard player. She's been playing that for years. And it makes me wonder, like, do we have misconceptions around like who these like customers are, like who these users are, who are making up half of the revenue on their phones, and maybe there are our parents, maybe they're our grandparents, and we don't even know, and we don't think of them as a part of that gaming community, right? So I'd be interested to know, like, what do those demographic numbers look like?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of data still needed on microtransactions, which is what you're speaking about. So for those who might not know, a lot of content, especially on mobile, but now it's becoming more and more prevalent on console and PC, is now free to play, which basically means I can download some of the top gaming titles out there absolutely free, play as much as I want absolutely free, never spend $1. And there are a vast majority of people who operate that way. They play the free to play titles, they do not spend money on them. That's it. Yet there is a small portion of that player base, which in the grand scheme of things, when you have hundreds of millions of people who game, right? Even a small 5 or 10% is a ton of people, right? But there's a small subsection of players who spend nearly all of the spend in microtransactions. they make up the vast majority of that spend. And it's mostly young people. It's mostly kids that take their parents' credit cards, right? But then, of course, you have people with their own money, like myself, who will spend a ton of money. I've embarrassingly looked up, there's certain games you can have them tell you, like how much money you've spent on certain microtransactions. And I'm not happy to say the numbers, but at least it's my own money, you know? But for those who also don't know, a lot of microtransactions, there's games that we call pay to win, which are generally a lot of mobile games. They're not really competitive games. You're not really playing against other people, but there are a good amount of games where if you spend real money, you will get more powerful in the game, and it makes the game easier, or you get unlocks faster, or you progress better, or whatever it is. Then there are games like Fortnite, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, where spending money isn't going to make you better at the game. You're not going to get any additional powers. You're not going to be better in any way. But what it does unlock for you are like cosmetics, right? So your character might look different, might have different visual effects, might have different special animations. You might get different flares around your profile that other people see. So an example of this is, Fortnite and Call of Duty, they love to do what's called character skins, which basically makes your character look different. And so many people might be surprised to hear that, for example, Nicki Minaj is a skin in Call of Duty. You can spend $10, $20 to get a digital in-game cosmetic skin of your character basically being Nicki Minaj, looking like she's ready for war.
Does she get money off it? I'm assuming.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
That's really interesting.
So they are doing partnership deals. Wow. Massive content creators, celebrities, musicians, tons of people are doing these types of deals where they give their image and likeness to an IP, and they become ingrained in the IP. Another example I love to bring up that I think is so meaningful is a number of years ago. I forget what year it was. It might have been 2018. Louis Vuitton partnered with League of Legends, which is another very popular competitive title. And at the World Finals for this game, which is huge, they sold out Madison Square Garden in 2016. It's a massive, in Asia, the game is exceptionally popular and has an international following. And Louis Vuitton made the trophy case for the championship trophy. And of course, in Louis Vuitton style, it was, a beautiful, like, trunk, whatever type trophy case. But in addition, and Tiffany and Co. had made the trophy. Okay. So you're seeing some like crazy, bourgeois partnerships in the space that you wouldn't expect, right? But then what was even more interesting was that Louis Vuitton released a limited League of Legends collaboration physical clothing collection that sold out primarily from Asian markets.
Yeah.
And, it's Louis Vuitton. A shirt was $500 or $600. It wasn't something that like everyone is easily purchasing. Then the most interesting thing, though, was that the women's Altier designer, whatever lead person at Louis Vuitton, collaborated with the League of Legends game designers and created an in-game customizable skin for one of the characters where the character was wearing Louis Vuitton clothing. And the animations then associated with the character's movesets and abilities and powers, flashed like the quintessential LV monogram in like certain special colors and stuff like that. So it was a very unique way to bring the fashion house into the game. And what's more is that it costs maybe $15 or $20 for you to get that skin for your character to own it permanently in the game. And what I found so valuable about it and so insightful for other brands in the space was that it was the best way to meet gamers where they are, right? It wasn't Louis Vuitton simply saying, oh, yes, you can spend $1,000 and get something that's co-branded. While plenty of people did that, that's not really an attainable thing for a lot of people to spend that much money on clothing, right? But they then made what is a pretty affordable microtransaction in the game that enabled people to, own Louis Vuitton on their character. And I thought it was a really unique and authentic, that's a buzzword that you hear a lot in the gaming marketing space, an authentic way to incorporate a brand with a game IP.
Yeah, that's, what, this is really interesting. It makes me think a little bit about some of these companies that we saw maybe like a year ago or 2 years ago, maybe like 2 or 3, who were trying to sell online real estate. Not like real estate online, but like we're trying to sell like chunks of space in like a virtual reality, right? And we had like some celebrities. I don't know if you caught wind of this, but like we had some celebrities, some rappers like out here saying like, yeah, like I have a space here, like spend.
So interesting. It's like when they do their coins and shit.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, exactly. And so some of them were like, come be my neighbor, spend.
Yeah.
It was like a lot of money. This was not like dollars. This was NFTs, like thousands of dollars.
Cryptocurrency. I mean, people.
I think that's the point, right? Is like the question for me, and this I think speaks to like the community, the value, and kind of the culture that we see developing in gaming, being authentic, which is what you're bringing up, because we see people, we see like, business leaders or industry folks sometimes trying to capitalize off of a vision of like a virtual world, and it just doesn't land, right? It just doesn't. Like that, or NFTs, right? I feel like that has come and gone. Maybe we'll see iterations of that in the future.
I'm very pleased for that to have failed.
Yeah, well,
I mean, lots of people got rich, of course, but I was always like, this seems fake, and so I'm glad it's gone away.
It's an assigned. It has a value when people assign it a value, and the same thing happened with this like virtual real estate thing, where like again, celebrities were like, I have this little piece of whatever property in this like virtual reality, come buy the plot next to mine for $10,000. And some people were like, wait, that's there's going to be value in this because it's the future and we're all going to be virtual. And the question becomes like, well, is there already inherent value because people are drawn to that space, or are you just assigning it value hypothetically and not thinking about the fact that nobody's going to use that specific virtual platform, which means it's meaningless, right?
Right.
And that question, I think, was answered with things like NFTs, with some of those transactions that happened. It was like a hot potato moment, right? Where folks were trying to pass it along to the next person. And if you kind of ended up with it when the attention went away, you were kind of effed. And where I think this is different is there's already an attention, a value, an experience, like a community, a culture in gaming spaces. And so it makes total sense for brands and for like businesses to want to collab, for celebrities to want to like integrate themselves, because there's real value. There's entertainment, there's experience, community, culture. You have all these like the correct ingredients, which makes it so unique. And we're kind of talking about some of the questions I was going to ask here around the culture, around kind of the differences between just gaming versus like esports and the competitiveness of it. But this is where I think we really are seeing that kind of the breeding ground of what is going to be, the virtual world, the digital world.
I have a lot to say on that. I think that first and for the audience and for whatever content you'll make off this, it's really important, and I might spend a little too long talking about it, to delineate between esports and gaming.
Right.
Because they are not the same thing. Mm-hmm. If you and I go outside with a basketball and start shooting hoops, are we suddenly in the NBA?
No, right? Yeah.
Some people might say, well, it's a one-on-one. No one plays one-on-one in the NBA.
Yeah.
Great. If we get 5 of our friends together each and play on teams, are we in an amateur league? No. Right? So just because you play video games doesn't mean that you are connected to esports. And there is a unique combination of factors that makes something an esport, right? There's a multiplayer title, right? There are weird niche competitions around single player titles, but I wouldn't call those competitive esports in the same way that we think of them broadly. So I'm going to leave that out to avoid confusion. So multiplayer, live, in front of audiences, right? Those are the 3 major components of what makes something an esport. And I should add that there is an official league regulation ruling kind of thing, right? I think that's what, right, when you have the official sports, right, you have referees, you have a rule system, you have the NFL doesn't really change its rule set ever, but they have it and it is strictly enforced in the sport, right? In esports, the games are changing all the time, especially these live multiplayer games, right? They're receiving new weapons, new updates, new characters, whatever. And so there's this beautiful art, I think, around game design where they have to make sure that the balance of the game is intact, right? So that there isn't one thing that is just like too powerful or too good that it's just better than everything else and makes the game not competitive, right? So there's a lot of art that goes into that. But there is the esports is a small box within the broader gaming bucket. And that's really important for everybody to remember when they're thinking about getting into the space. One thing that I will say very bluntly is that esports, for the most part, it's not a profitable space. Esports on its own is not a profitable space. Viewership is largely free. So where, to watch a lot of NFL games or, I don't know, boxing, whatever it is, you're doing pay-per-view, you're subscribing to a certain cable service, whatever it is, right? Almost every esport is on Twitch or YouTube or whatever other live streaming platform, and it's free to watch. You don't have to pay money to watch these things. So the media rights value of broadcasting esports is low, and that's a revenue driver, right? The next thing is ticket sales, right? Because, of course, people want to be in a venue. But because of the way that obviously gaming functions is that it is a digital format, it can actually be easier to watch it at home than to watch it, in person. But I've never appreciated nor found valid the arguments that traditional sports stadiums are way cooler than esports events and stadiums. I really think it's obviously a subjective opinion, but when you go to certain esports competitions, which I've been to a couple of, the energy is great. People are there for the same reason that they want to show up to a sports game. They want to be in the room where it's happening, right? So there really isn't a fair argument to be made around is it more engaging to be at a sports game versus a esports game? But this is all to say that esports is very effective at marketing titles to broader audiences and to keeping audiences engaged at the highest level, but it is not a significant revenue driver for the games that make them. Riot Games, which is the publisher of League of Legends, they also put on their own esports league for League of Legends, which is not always normal. There's a lot of publishers that will work with a third party tournament organizer or whatever it is for their esports, but Riot owns the venture as well, and they have openly said, I don't know how recently, within the last few years, that they basically break even on their investment into the esports scene. And League is one of the largest esports, if not the largest in the world, compared to so many others. So for them to say that, you have to know that kind of the other esports scenes are not nearly as successful. So there's that issue there.
Yeah. So that, like, the question that comes up for me then is is the reason we still see those investments is because there is still value in developing that culture and community around the gaming, right? And like the consumerism there.
Yeah.
What I want to go back to something you said about, like, there's still obviously like a passion for people to be in the room where it happens, right? And you create these fan bases. And I think a lot of influencers today have done that, right? They create huge fan bases, which then can be monetized. Even if the sport itself is not. I
want to just say before you ask your question, influencers aren't always and almost are never esports players. So they're not tied to the success of the sport, right? They are developing their own personal brand. And we'll talk about that more, but I want
is that overlap? Is there any overlap there, like with some of the more notable?
There's some. Okay. There's some. So there are a lot of sports players that, I'll say it, they don't speak very eloquently when they're interviewed. You know what I mean? Like, they're not personalities, right? But the most successful sports players that you see, I think, are the ones who not only are kick ass at what they do, but they're also have a strong personal brand. They develop a personality. They go on talk shows. They make social media content, whatever. The same is true of any athlete in esports, right? There are a few who will make a pivot from being an esports player to being a content creator full time. And what you'll hear from all of them across the board is that it is significantly more profitable to be a successful content creator than to be a successful esports athlete. Obviously, in traditional sports, that's not quite exactly the same, because you sign, tens of millions of dollar contracts to play on some of these sports teams. But it's still staggering the amount of money that people will make as content creators.
Yeah, right. That's interesting, because I wonder if that'll change as we continue to progress.
It started to. There was so most people are familiar with Twitch, which is a content live streaming platform. A lot of people are familiar that YouTube has live streaming as well. There's been for a few years another competitor to the live streaming scene on Twitch, which is called Kick. And Kick is backed by massive gambling money. And so, of course, for ethical reasons, a lot of people do not want to be associated with Kick. They don't want to do gambling related sponsorships and partnerships because of, a lot of audiences on Twitch and YouTube and Kick are not 18, right? So you're promoting gambling to young people, and even when you're 18, you're an idiot, right? So you're seeing these people gamble, and they're of course being given money to do the gambling with, right? It's not usually their own money when they do these types of sponsorships. And so Kick has become popular because a lot of content creators are taking deals to move over to the platform on a somewhat exclusive or fully exclusive basis and make content on there. And so you have a very popular content creator, former esports athlete named XQC, who signed, I want to say, a $100 million contract for a 2-year or 3-year deal, where it was like half or more than half the first year and the other year. LeBron James makes that kind of money. Yeah. So it is really fascinating to see these types of deals being created, because the attention is on a lot of these platforms, and that's not being lost on a lot of advertisers and marketers. Now, to pay someone that much in the gaming space, it's gambling money, you know, so that's easier for them. But I think that's a staggering point that a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah. That is really fascinating. And influencer culture is growing so much. It seems like an organic opportunity for a lot of those folks that maybe know how to, speak a little bit more eloquently, or just like build kind of favorability or a following or a loyalty to capitalize off of as a compliment. But I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see that shift as like other alternatives come their way to monetize. I'm sure that's only going to continue to grow, right?
Yeah. Well, you have, really, I'll just give you another example. Kai Cenat, who a lot of people are familiar with in name, top Twitch streamer, massive following, very successful. He's been recently doing a month-long streaming marathon where he's been having celebrity guests come. Kim Kardashian was there. Winnie Harlow was there. Ray J was there. Benny Blanco and Selena Gomez came on. I mean, Mariah Carey came on. It's insane, the reach that this guy has.
Yeah.
And he's like 22, by the way. Him and his friends who have a content creator org, they started a what's like a deodorant brand called personal hygiene brand.
Personal hygiene
called Tone. And it's a deodorant, it's a moisturizer, it's very affordable, to their credit. They really didn't try to say like, oh, it's some premium thing. They're just trying to make a good product. It's now in Target, and it is sold out almost anywhere you look for it at Target. And so, it really speaks to these content creators being able to branch into other endeavors. And that's not the norm, right? Like there are a lot of content creators who don't have the ability to do that. They might try, but it's not the level of mass reach that some of these other creators have. But it is definitely, people are thinking about, how do I compound my wealth? How do I continue to stay, up? And other business ventures are for sure that.
And to their credit, there's a difference between being able to garner attention and being very good at that, and being able to like direct consumers.
Convert.
And convert. Like that is not, like, I think at this point, we have seen influencers, like social media personalities, who are really good at one or the other or both. And like we've seen kind of that play out, which has been interesting. And I think our folks who are talking about being gamers and building out like these influencer identities are starting to make their way into an even broader mainstream kind of space. I've been seeing, even in Washington, D.C., like some of our policymakers starting to engage more. I was just in the office of our first Gen Z congressman, Congressman Maxwell Frost, and he had some gaming stuff up in the office. And so it's cool to kind of see that start to come into the policy space a little bit more. So I'm pretty sure, like Chuck Schumer is not out here playing Fortnite, right?
Well,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Sure, it's possible. You don't know. Not to be too topical, because I know that we don't want to get too deep into this, but with the recent assassination or shooting and whatnot, Congress has now called in the CEOs of Twitch, Discord, Reddit, and one other, I forget what the last one was, to basically testify about what they're calling radicalization on these platforms, right? And
interesting.
And it made my friends and I laugh a bit, because it's kind of like these older communities don't understand that Discord and Twitch and whatever, they're very broad spaces, like it's not something that, we're suddenly all reading the Communist Manifesto just because we're on this website, right? It is what you kind of make it to be, right? And so just like I could use a Facebook group to radicalize people, I could use Twitch or Reddit, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it is what it is.
I think that's an interesting point, because we went through a similar kind of like a political discourse here with social media platforms, right? Where there was a concern that these platforms were dictating to people how they should think or what they should believe. and obviously algorithms create, these kind of personalized experiences and then kind of direct people in their own biases in that way. But they're also still open platforms, right? And so I know there's a lot of policy infrastructure around how do we balance our understanding of these platforms as both open platforms, right? Like town square spaces that anybody can come and speak in, and also spaces that are still semi-regulated by the companies themselves. And so I don't see that policy conversation going anywhere anytime soon, as we have more and more platforms come out that are providing open spaces, digital spaces for people to gather and organize themselves. But it is hard for the folks in DC, our policymakers who are not personally and on a daily basis being exposed to these things. I mean, heck, even me, like I'm catching up. I'm trying to stay informed. But like, if you're not in the loop on a lot of these like evolutions, as these new platforms are coming out so quickly, it's very easy to get left behind and lose an understanding. Let alone trying to regulate that with law. Like it is a big conversation here. And we have a lot of folks who are helpful in leading, and we hope that also, we know that a lot of our folks on the Hill, a lot of our policy staff and friends in Congress watch our content. And so even this conversation, I think, helps them understand.
I hope so.
Like what this space is and what it's not. Because it is. It's hard to work in policy. But you're right. Like there is that question of like, what's happening in these spaces? Are folks being radicalized one way or another? And how do you like adjust for that? And there's obviously, now we're also seeing like some of these influencers move into politics, right? Like that is happening more and more now. And someone recently, I can't remember if it was like one of our earlier webinars, we were talking about like democracy and social media. And there was this thought that like in another 10 years, a lot of social media influencers will start to run for office, will start to capitalize off of.
Maybe. I mean, have you heard of Hassan Abi?
Mm-mm.
So Hassan Piker is his name. He is a very prominent Twitch streamer who streams literally every day about political topics. He's been on the Young Turks. He's related to that guy. He has been on the Piers Morgan show. He helped Zoran Mandamni run here in New York. I mean, he's very politically active and involved, and he's had a massive influence, I think, on younger audiences because he's meeting them where they are, right, on Twitch, and he's basically reacting in real time to political developments. And so, I do think that you'll see more politics involved in the live streaming space. I mean, Aiden Ross, if you're familiar with the name, he helped give Donald Trump a platform. He helped him during the campaign and had him on his live stream, and the many politicians are starting to recognize that gaming and gaming related audiences is probably one of the only ways to reach young people these days. Especially because traditional mediums are not going to do it anymore. Right. And even things like Instagram and TikTok and whatever are good, but they're not covering everybody. Right. And so some of these gaming spaces are the way.
That's a really like big flag for people, right? It certainly makes me wonder, like, where are we putting ourselves as well as an organization to like connect with people, right? Because you're right, like, it is also, we're like, there's such an oversaturation now on some of these social media platforms with ads, with political content. And it's not necessarily like we're always going to look for the fresher space where it's more person oriented, right, or more like individual personality and opinion based. And so we do, like, I think it calls us to kind of move into some of these other spaces. we've been covering all the questions that I have in front of me, which is awesome, and so we're just having a really great conversation. I think, to speak to the entertainment, the entrepreneurship of it, we've been kind of touching on, Gen Z as consumers, helping drive kind of economic opportunities for gamers who become influencers or podcasts and creators, that moving into kind of the mainstream. But there's a real economic opportunity here, right? Like, this is an industry. It is a huge, huge industry, with a lot of opportunity, and a lot of tech looks to gaming to help us drive, like, speed, and developing, our virtual reality spaces. And so, like, this is not just about entertainment and like personal use of time, or even just building community amongst young people. It really is about driving technology further for all industries, right? Like, this is so much bigger than just gaming when we talk about the technology developments. Yeah,
definitely.
And the economic opportunities that come with that, right? I think, we're kind of starting to wrap up, at least the questions that I have here, but
sure.
We're thinking about, like, the millions of fans. How do we see gaming evolving or kind of shifting with some of these new technologies that are starting to be integrated? I know I try to stay on the forefront of that. I have my Meta glasses right here. Like,
nice.
I'm excited for like us to continue to see kind of newer iterations. And I think, these glasses are a great example of a company doing it in a way where they're meeting people where they are, with the technologies they want in that moment, that are maybe a little bit more comfortable to wear outside in public. But as we evolve, as we start getting more comfortable with, like, these things on our faces, where do you see that, like, pushing gaming forward?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, yesterday Meta did its Meta Connect conference, and they announced the release of these new glasses that basically have a built-in display.
And
are
so those the Orion?
Basically it's a I think a predecessor to what Orion will be eventually.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Is my understanding, but I might be wrong about that. But basically, the technology is continuing to allow us to immerse ourselves deeper into what gaming is, right? And what's interesting is being an avid PC gamer, it is difficult for me to play some VR titles, right? Like, I enjoy playing them, but the experience is so different, right? Where gaming can be such a passive thing, playing in virtual reality is like an engaged, active, physical thing. Swinging your arms or aiming and whatever when you're playing. But it is really fascinating to see the technology continue to evolve. It hasn't quite punctured content creation, I would say, right? Like, the number of top Twitch streamers or YouTube content creators or whatever who are making things in VR is still on the lower side. But as the technology continues to progress, you're seeing all sorts of different add-ons to the tech, right? Like, you can now pair your Meta Quest, for example, or VR headset with a haptics vest, right? So basically, if you get shot or whatever in the game, you'll feel it in this vest that you might be wearing, right? There's also people who own these really elaborate walking treadmills, basically. So you are standing on a surface that can roll effectively, and you use it to walk around in the virtual reality, right? So that will continue to progress and only improve. And who knows what it will do for multiplayer gaming? I mean, hell, maybe it'll make everyone healthier if they play gaming that way, because then it becomes physical and not just like, oh, I'm sat and I'm using a controller or using a mouse and keyboard. So I think I'm not an engineer or tech person, but I'll tell you that the technology has evolved so much since when I first encountered VR, 10 or whatever years ago, to now being able to have it at home in a $300, MetaQuest headset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll only continue to see it advance, in my opinion, specifically because of like the increase in bandwidth that we're going to see with things like 6G, with better internet infrastructure across the country. The United States is making massive investments in modernizing our infrastructure for all of this access, right? And so with that comes, and we're currently in the process of figuring out how to deploy all of those resources to modernize. And with that will come better tools, will come better like usability experiences, etc. So I'm sure we are just on the cusp too. Like we haven't even started, but it is interesting. That is going to unpack so many questions, so many economic opportunities for like different industries, right? Like you're talking so much more than just a $10 skins collab. It's going to start to be, so much more.
It's a lifestyle,
yeah,
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so they're, the things that they want and the products that they own are all going to be connected in some way.
Yeah. It's the wearables, I think, for me are what's interesting. And these glasses, I think, are a great example. And I'd take them out and put them on, but they're actually out of the case. I don't know where they are. But I think that's an interesting example because whereas, you buy an iPad or you buy something that's the specific device and you use it, but if you put it down, you put it down. You stop interacting with it.
Right.
These are transition sunglasses. So I will wear these out and about throughout my day.
Right.
And if I want to listen to music, I have them on already. If I want to answer a phone call, it changes the way that you are going about your day to day, right?
Well, and embeds itself in what you already do, right? And that's a big conversation around technology is how are we trying to do something that one device we already use might do better, right? Why would you stop using some device and use a different one, right? And the glasses are a good example of something meeting people where they are, as we've been saying.
Yeah. And so you add and I am very excited about like the Orion and these new iterations of glasses that are still kind of more glasses like that you can like, unless people kind of see the flash, people can't tell you're wearing something that is, like a technology wearable device. But I like that, and I'm excited for these new iterations with some of these these lens additions for the augmented reality pieces, because I do think that will become even more interesting to engage with, while still not disrupting the way that we're going about that day to day, right? I think for me, there's still kind of a level of discomfort if I think about wearing like the Oculus or like the MetaQuest out in public, just going about my day, especially in DC, right? People are going to be a little weirded out. I'll wear these glasses to meetings, and sometimes people ask like, are you recording me? And you have to kind of say, no, I'm not, right? They would be flashing if I was recording you, which is one of the things they do to indicate that for people. But I think we're just at the cusp, and I'm really excited to see where this all continues to go. But I think gaming and the broader industry around that and community around that are going to continue to lead the way. I think that is where like the culture is being defined for like what we're comfortable with some of these technologies. So I'm excited to stay connected. I don't know if you have anything like to kind of end with or share here in the space, like some of your bigger takeaways or things from the conversation you want to go back to.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this for hours. It's my profession and everything. I think that ultimately the gaming space is worth a lot of people's attention and focus, right? And if you're a marketer and you're not thinking about gamers as its own audience, I think you're doing it wrong. And gaming has become so prevalent in our society, and it's no longer this, you're in your mom's basement, no job kind of thing. It's just something that a lot of people do with their time. And so I encourage people to continue learning about it, engaging in it. I'm absolutely a resource for anybody, but it's definitely something that isn't going to go away and is only continuing to increase, right? And whether that's esports or broader gaming or casual or mobile gaming or whatever it is, there's many different ways to get connected with gamers, and it's a touch point that I think more people need to dial into at this point. I did see that somebody asked about job opportunities in the gaming space for people just entering the job market. There's many different avenues. When I first graduated college myself, I thought the only way you could get into the gaming space was through like game creation, so design or story or art or whatever. But there's many different sides to it. There's marketing, there's business development, there's talent management, right? There's a lot of different talent agencies in the space that have good entry-level roles. There are agencies like the one I work at where we have clients that need content or need to basically work with people that have gaming knowledge and background, for influencer marketing, like what I do, for sponsorships and partnerships, like what I did with AT&T. So there's many different places. I recommend, there's a website called Hitmarker it's very catered towards gaming specific jobs. So I recommend, looking up resources around gaming jobs and entry level gaming jobs. But there's many different opportunities on the business side rather than just the tech and design side. So yeah, that's all I'd say. And not sure if you have any other questions for me or there's any other questions from anyone watching, but very glad to have the conversation.
Yeah, it's a great conversation, and I always go back to the policy of things, like working in DC, and so like I always think about like how is policy impacting this, and how is this impacting policy, and that I think to me is really interesting as well. Because to be fair, like a lot of the folks that are doing the day-to-day work in Washington DC around policy are probably somewhere like in our age group, right? And so they are folks that are a little bit more tapped into this. And so they're kind of using it as a reference point and thinking about their work in policy. Certainly, I think a lot there to explore. We're going to continue to figure out like how do we stay engaged with our gaming community, because it is, when we talk about like our purpose as a Gen Z organization that's here to elevate Gen Z in tech, this is a space where we're already dominating, right? We're already leading young people in their consumerism, in the way that they're driving that industry forward. And so I think there's a lot to learn there. But really appreciate your time in the conversation. I have learned a lot, and it's made me want to pick up some like new toys, to get a little bit more engaged. Because I think it's so cool to understand like just how big the community is, and how much thought goes into it. Like you said, it's an art. But really appreciate the time, Zach. It's been a great conversation. Really excited to see this go up online, and continue to reach more people.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time, and thanks for including me.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining us for this month's Tech Talk. Really great conversation here. And we hope that you'll join us next month.